Shabbat Shalom. Happy Sabbath. Once again, the cycle has gone around and we're back here on that day that Yah had set aside for his people. And indeed, we have heeded his word. And so today we want to look at that subject we call the character of the kingdom. The character of the kingdom. Now, what do I mean by this? Most people that I know who are believers, they are waiting for the kingdom. And the word of Yah has made it clear that the kingdom people must have kingdom values. And therefore, it is the character that we form during the time that we live on the earth that will give us access into the kingdom. We want to look at that today, and we want to look at that through the prophetic blessings or benedictions of Jacob that he gave to his sons before he died. We want to frame our subject today with that blessing to each of the tribes. Now, as I look out into the world, it seemed to me that there is this inability of world leaders to bring about peace, to restore peace. There is this irreducible complexity in the world because of evil. There is problems everywhere you turn, and you kind of get the impression that you are living in a giddy house because the world is leaning morally, spiritually, towards a direction that Yah did not intend for it to go. And as you listened yesterday, September the 27th, you would have heard Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, gave a speech. And in his speech, he made reference to the singling out of Israel, a moral stain on the United Nations. And he decries the institution with unprecedented bitterness. A swamp of anti-Semitic bile and a flat earth society. That's how he spoke. He has gone to the United Nations seeking help for his country, because this is a body of people that they say is there to assist. And I cannot fault him for going there to seek help. But we have, a few days earlier, the Ukraine leader, Mr. Zelensky. He addressed the United Nations too, seeking help for his country that is in war with Russia. And again, it makes sense that this body is there to assist the nations, then seek help by all means. But as I reflect and as I think back into history, I think of the 3rd of October 1935. Unannounced, Italian dictator Benito Mussolini forces invaded Ethiopia from Eritrea and also Italian Somaliland. The capital of Addis Ababa fell in May 1936, the intent of which was to increase Italy's Africa's empire. That's why Mussolini decided to invade Ethiopia. I also recall Emperor Haile Selassie was driven into exile as a consequence. First, he went to Jerusalem, and then he went to Britain, where he spent time in Bath, the city of Bath. I think of that. But I also remember that on June 30th, 1936, Haile Selassie came before the League of Nations. That's the forerunner for today's United Nations, and he spoke in Amharic language, but he spoke eloquently, which they translate into English, and they understood what he was saying. They understood what the emperor was saying. He too decried the use of poison gas, which killed Ethiopian civilians and soldiers alike. Then he said, I ask, what measures do you intend to take? He's speaking to the United Nations. What measures will you take for this barbaric action done to us by the Italians? He also said, what reply shall I have to take back to my country? What shall I say to them? What shall I say to them? I want you to understand that the man who stood in Geneva in 1936 and spoke the way he did, he is the 225th descendant of King Solomon. That's the man that I reference here. And he spoke to these people, many of which would have been beneath his rank. And he asked for help, and there was none forthcoming. He was in exile. He returned to the United Nations in 1963, 4th of October. This coming week will be 61 years from his second speech and 88 years from his first speech. The emperor spoke, and his words went unheeded. And so we see this irreducible complexity, the inability to restore peace in a world that politicians and others are promising peace, and they're offering advice like candies. And so this morning, we want to look at this thing, because when Emperor Selassie spoke then, and as I look and I heard the speeches of yesterday and this week at the UN, nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. And so I understand, so you should understand too, why the troubadour from Trenchtown looked at Selassie's speech and was able to say, until the philosophy which holds one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited, and I mean abandoned. Everywhere there's going to be war. There's going to be war. Prophecy says there's going to be war. There's war in Lebanon. There's war in Sudan. There's war in Democratic Republic of Congo, Syria, Chad, Central African Republic, Cyprus, Egypt, Iraq, Israel, Morocco, Palestine, Syria, Turkey, Yemen, and the Western Sahara. There's going to be war. It's going to be war. Until there's no longer first and second class citizens of any nation, there's going to be war. And until that day, the dream of lasting peace, he said, it's going to be a fleeting illusion to be pursued, but will never be attained. And so people this morning are looking at the headlines and they're asking the question. They're saying Mr. Zelensky has come to the United Nations, and he has so far gotten a lot of support. Mr. Netanyahu has also had a lot of support and sympathy, and perhaps rightly so, some will say. Why shouldn't he? People's lives are important, and all lives matter. But the question emerges in the context of the whole irreducible complexity. The question is, if they got support, what was it that caused Haile Selassie not to get support? Why? Is it about complexion? Why? And so we want to look at the whole origins of this thing. We want to look at where it started. And so turn with me to the book of Bereshit. Bereshit, that's Genesis. And we're going to look at chapter 49. Within the evening of his well-lived day, we're talking about Jacob here, the patriarch called his sons together, a kind of a precepts of unity, telling them not to be like the sons of Abraham, who even today, even as we speak, are still warring in Gaza. So he calls them to unity. He wanted to bless them before he passed on. And so the aged patriarch, by inspiration of the Ruach, pronounced his prophetic benediction in describing the conditions that the descendants of his tribes would have to go through. And so, despite the untenable assertions of contemporary man that that leader will give you peace, and such a leader will do this, it is not even worth the paper that they sometimes write their speech on. It's not going to happen. And so Jacob spoke in a way that makes it inexplicable to conceive that any foresight or sagacity of man could have allowed him to conjecture so accurately in the word. None could have foreseen it, but he spoke. So come with me to chapter 49, and the word says, and Jacob called unto his sons and said, gather yourself together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. That's the nowadays. gather yourselves together and hear, ye sons of Jacob, and hearken unto Yishrael your father. Did you hear that? As I read that, I would like to just deposit this thought to you. He says, hear, ye sons of Jacob, and hearken unto Yishrael your father. Did you get that point? Here is a thought I want to deposit. With the exception of Benjamin or Benjamin, all the other children were born outside of Israel, Canaan. In essence, all of them were born to him when he was Jacob. And we know the name Jacob means a plunderer. It's not complimentary. Here's a man who stole his brother's blessing. And he had to leave home forcefully to avoid reprisal from Esau. So these are the sons of Jacob. But now he says, hear your father Yishrael. Now, as I read that thought, clinically, there is a distinction to be made between Jacob, and between Israel, because we're dealing with character. That's our subject today. Jacob is not the same character of Israel. The word said he wrestled with an angel of Yah. And Yah wrestled with him all night. And after that experience, that situation, he was blessed and his name was changed. And he was named Israel, Yishrael. So when he says, listen to Israel, he's saying, I'm not the Jacob, I'm not the Jacob of old. I am now partaker of the divine lifestyle. That's what he's saying. So, having understood that, I think of Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. In chapter 48, we read that where he put his hand on them and blessed them and said, let my name. Well, let's read it. Chapter 48 and verse 16 of Bereshit, that's Genesis. The angels which redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and let my name, what's his name? Israel, on them, and the name of my fathers, Abraham, Yishak, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. Understand where I'm going with this. He said, listen to Israel. Then he blessed these North African boys, and he called them Israel. Understand that the rest of his children did not receive this blessing. They did not receive this blessing. Even as Esau did not receive Isaac's blessing, only Jacob received it. The rest of the sons did not receive this specific blessing in chapter 48. Just the sons, the North African boys that he blessed, his grandson, and they were named Israel. Understand that. So, in all the debate, we have to ask ourselves, who is Israel? Who is Israel? And also to say that the land Israel, which has become a battleground for many nations, is not a physical inheritance. Being born in Israel won't give you access to the kingdom. It requires righteousness. That's what we're dealing with, character. So the word says that when he called them together, verse 3 says, Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity, and the excellency of power, unstable as water, thou shalt not excel. Notice something here, that the blessing that but it's more of a prophecy. Or it is a blessing and a prophecy. Because that which he pronounces on Reuben, it's a prophecy to the descendants of Reuben. It will affect them more than it affects Reuben in that regard. He's saying, this is what will befall your descendants in later years. So the character of each of the tribes here, the leader of the tribes, determines and filters through the rest of the tribe. We need to understand that. So we are dealing with attitudes. We're dealing with character. It's the only thing you can take to the kingdom. And we ought to form character by the experiences that we go through. Reuben, you will not excel. You are as unstable as water. We see no kings coming out of the tribe of Reuben. No judges. They did not get very far. And according to chapter 5 of First Chronicles, we are told that the birthright, the promise of the birthright, was given to Joseph. Shall we go there? Chapter 5 of Chronicles. Because Yah is teaching us that obedience is important. Very, very important. But we sometimes seem not to listen to what Yah is saying. The word says in chapter 5, now the sons of Reuben, the firstborn, but for as much as he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given unto the sons of Joseph. His birthright was given to the sons of Joseph. Shall I say it another way? His birthright. Now, the son, the first son, is entitled to a double portion of the blessing. That's what Esau cried for. That's what Jacob stole from Esau, a double portion. And so that which was Reuben's inheritance was given to two North African boys, two boys that were born in Al-Kibulan, two boys that were born in Egypt. I don't want you to miss that. Let's read it again for emphasis. Now the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Yishmael, for he was the firstborn, but for as much as he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given unto the sons of Joseph. That's Ephraim and Manasseh. And the genealogy is not to be reckoned after his birthright. The birthright must now be reckoned after two North African boys. Scholars don't like to say North Africa. They prefer to say Egypt, as if Egypt is not in Africa. But Yah wants us to know. So Reuben lost out. That's why the Bible says, flee immorality, flee fornication, flee adultery. And it doesn't matter what case you make for yourself. Even as Reuben made a case for himself, because the word says, and when we read the book of Jasher, we understand why he did what he did. The word tells us in Genesis that Rachel had given birth to Benjamin, and she died. She died. And now, Reuben is the firstborn. He understands what is going on and what's been going on for years, that his father has two wives, one loved and one unloved. The one that is loved is now dead. It makes sense in terms of how he perceived it, that now that the loved one is gone, my mother will get some love. But the word says he went and put his tent in Bilhah's tent. He didn't move in with Leah. He moved in with his concubine. And that angered Reuben. But Reuben was not thinking. Reuben decided, I'm going to sleep with Dan's mother and Naphtali's mother. Wow. That's what he did. His father's wife, his stepmother. And the word says, Reuben, your character is not good enough. Not good enough. So let's go back to the book of Genesis. Let's go back there. Genesis 49, that's where we are. Simeon and Levi, verse 5, because we're dealing with character here. I'm trying to make a point that it doesn't matter whether you're born in Israel and whatever tribe you say you're from, Yah is looking at character. And so when Jacob was blessing his children, he's pointing out the flaws that are in their character. And he's saying this flaw will follow through down the ages and will affect your descendants in the same way. The sins of the father attend unto other generations sometimes, does it not? Sometimes we see ourselves in our own children. Simeon and Levi are brethren. They're instruments of cruelty. That's what's in their habitation. Oh, my soul, come not into their secret, unto their assembly. Don't join their assembly. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the unrighteous. Don't sit with them, don't eat with them, don't walk with them, says the psalmist in chapter 1. Don't do that. Jacob here, the patriarch, is speaking about his own children. Sometimes we are restrained because we're afraid to speak the truth to our children. We don't have the guts to be parents anymore. Not Jacob here. He's telling it like it is. O my soul, come not thou into their secret, unto their assembly. Mine honor, be not thou united, for in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they dig down a wall. They heard that Dinah, their sister, had been taken by the prince of Shechem, and he laid with her, and that she was soiled. They knowing that it should not have happened in Israel, but they became angry and they ransacked, they ravaged the whole of Shechem to the extent where Jacob said, "You made me stink." You may see that as an hyperbole being used to make a point by Jacob, but it happened. It happened. And so at the time, you know, Jacob did not say much. He kept all these things to himself. So you think when you do your evil and you sin, Yah doesn't notice? But now he's remembering all of this and he's letting you know, I can't use you because character matters. Life matters, but character matters within that life. Don't use these boys. And so when you turn to the book of Judges, let's go there to make a point also. The word says that Joshua had died, Moses had died, and they want to know who will go up. The word says, now after the death of, I'm reading from chapter 1. Now after the death of Joshua, it came to pass that the children of Israel asked Yah, saying, who shall go up for us against the Canaanites first, to fight against them? And Yah said, Judah. Hold on. You have Reuben, you have, who's the firstborn, you have Simeon, and you have Levi. Judah is the fourthborn. It says, send Judah. Don't send these angry boys. Don't send these people with temper. Don't send Reuben because, you know, he may just go up there and see something and his emotion gets better of him. We want leaders who can stand throughout any circumstances like a needle to the pole. We want strong men to be priests of the home. That's the kind of men that we want. That's the kind of men that we want for the kingdom. Men who respect their wives. That kind of men. Men who will teach their children what is right. Is there any? So send Judah. Let's go back to Genesis 49. Curse be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. And I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Did you understand that? I will divide them and scatter them. So you better come with me to Numbers chapter 26. Numbers chapter 26. Because we're reading here, it says that, and it came to pass after the plague that Yah spake unto Moshe and Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saying, take a census of all the congregation of the children of Israel from 20 years old and upward throughout their father's house, all that are able to go to war in Israel. Go and do that. But the word tells us that from a population of about 59,000 now to 22,200. Simeon diminished. Simeon became the weakest tribe, the weakest tribe of all the nation of people because of what they did. And when you read chapter 19 of Joshua, you see when the land was allocated, Simeon did not get any. Simeon was put within the boundaries of Judah. He said, the prophecy said, I will scatter them in Israel. Are you with me? And so when you trace Simeon's character of what he did, he was angry, bitter. Yes, of course, it must be dealt with because his sister was raped. And it needed to be resolved. But what they did was superfluous. Superfluous requirement. And so we see Simeon is now the smallest of all the tribes, the smallest of all the tribes. And that's remarkable. And as you know, Levi did not get any inheritance either. They were the priest. And so, you know, we need to, well, let's read it for you. Verse 14 of chapter 26, he says, these are the families of the Simeonites, 22,200 in chapter 14. So they became the smallest of all the tribes. Are you with me? And so you're seeing the accuracy of Jacob's benediction spoken way back in Genesis is now affecting the children of Israel even now in the land as they fight. And so the word says, we're not going to look at all of them, but we want to look at some of them. Let's look at Gad, verse 19. Well, before that, because the word says that Gad, had now joined with David. Remember, Gad is in the northern kingdom. But when David was being crowned, they came and they joined with him. You know what? Let's read. Let's go to 1 Chronicles and we read chapter 12. And the word says in verse 8, and the Gadites, they separated themselves unto David in the hold to the wilderness, men of might, the Gadites. Are you with me? These were mighty men, men of war. They would do well in our society today. Fit for the battle, that could handle shield and buckler, whose faces were like the faces of lions, and were as swift as the roes upon the mountain, Ezer the first, Obadiah the second, Eliab the third, Mishmanah the fourth, Jeremiah the fifth, Ataiah the sixth, Eliel the seventh, Johanan the eighth, Elzabad the ninth, Jeremiah the tenth, Macbanea the 11th. These were the sons of Gad, captain of the host. One of the least was over 100, and the greatest over 1,000. So the least within this tribe was leading a man of 100, and the greatest 1,000. Now, why is that so important? Well, I want you to look at the map I gave you This is it, if you can see it. And you will see here that Gad is here on the eastern part of the river Jordan. The Jordan River runs down here. And so this is Gad, which means, and you remember also that the Reubenites and Gad had asked Moses, say, we don't want to go over. We want to stay here. We want to stay. And Moses said to them, you better go over and help your brethren fight. And when, you're through, you can come back. So this is where they live. And this is entrance. And all the marauding people who were attacking Israel at the time, they had to come through the entrance of Gad. And even in leaving, they have to come through the same way. So by way of circumstances and the necessity, these people, these Gadites, become warriors because they had to defend Israel. And that's where they are. And so the word says the Gadites, we need the Gadites. They were warriors, and their faces were like lions. Then we read also about Asher. Let's deal with Asher. Verse 20. And it says, out of Asher his bread shall be fat, and he shall yield royal dainties. But I want you to know also that the same thing that Jacob did, Moses did something similar. He did a blessing before he died. Come with me to Deuteronomy chapter 33. Deuteronomy chapter 33. That's why Yeshua says, I have not come to destroy what the prophets wrote, because they still have impact. They're still affecting people's lives, despite what the church teaches. Chapter 33 and verse 24. And he says, and Asher, he said, let Asher be blessed with children. Let him be acceptable to his brethren, and let him dip his foot in oil. Let him be blessed with children, and let him be acceptable. That's Asher. To his brethren. Let him be acceptable to his brethren, and let him dip his foot in oil. Now, come with me to Genesis chapter 30 to contextualize a statement made there, and we will look at Genesis chapter 30, and we will dilate upon verse 8. You know the story very well that Jacob went to stay with his mother's brother, Laban. And during the course of that period he spent there, he fell in love with Leah and Rachel. He loved Rachel. But Leah was more fruitful, and she just kept producing, whereas Rachel couldn't have any children. Verse 8. And Rachel said, with great wrestling, she's struggling with her sister because her sister is having children and she can't have any. She said, with great wrestling, I have wrestled with my sister and I have prevailed, because and she called his name, because let's read from verse 7. And Bilhah, Rachel's maid conceived again and bare Jacob a second son. And Rachel said, with great wrestling, I have wrestled in with my sister and I prevailed. And she called his name Naphtali. Naphtali is the word for struggling in Hebrew, wrestling. That's what it means. So his name Naphtali. And Moses said, let him have children. So Rachel had children by way of her handmaid, and Moses also said that he must dip his feet in oil. Now, when you look at Israel, most of the olive oil comes from the land. And moreover, I think Moses was talking not just about olive oil, because in 2009, they found petroleum in the land of Asher. They found petroleum there. Over here, you see on your map, on that side, Asher. And so when you read the book of Luke, chapter 2, you remember in verse 36 and 38, you will remember a woman called Anna, who had been married, and she was an aged woman, but she spent most of her time in the temple. She is from this tribe. She is from this tribe. Now, Naphtali or Naphtali and Zebulun. Now because all of these things has to be fulfilled by the Messiah. The Messiah has come to fulfill all these things. It says, Naphtali is a hind let loose, he giveth goodly words. That's a blessing on Naphtali. He giveth good words. So come with me to Matthew. Matthew, and we're going to do chapter 4 here. Matthew chapter 4, come with me. Matthew chapter 4. And let's start at verse 12. And the word says, now when Yeshua had heard that Yohanan was cast into prison, he departed to Galilee. I want you to understand, as we looked at Gad earlier, we're made to understand that Elijah, the prophet, was a Gadite. I know the Bible says Elijah the Tishbite, but it was in the vicinity of Tishbe, which is in the region of the Gadite land. And so, remember we said how the faces of the people were like lions. They are warriors. And you see how Elijah was? When we read 2 Kings, and we saw that they wanted to arrest him, and the king sends 50 men, all that Elijah did was said, let fire come down from heaven, and that's a Gadite. So sometimes we see Gadites in our churches, and we don't know, sometimes we're married to Gadites. Elijah said, let fire come down from heaven and consume them, and it did. And the king sent 50 more men and said, the king wants you. And he said, let fire come down from heaven and consume me. And it did. Now you got to ask yourself a question. Is it Yah's will that ought to be done? Is it Yah's will? Every time he speaks, fire comes down and consume the people. You also notice how he behaved, when you read chapter 17 and chapter 18 of the book of Kings, when he took those false leaders up to Mount Carmel and decided to kill them. That's a Gadite. You look at somebody, you say, yes, that's a Gadite. Moses had written in chapter 18 of Deuteronomy that the way you know the prophet of Yah is if when he speaks, the thing comes through. So every time Elijah spoke, it came through. And you could draw the conclusion or the inference that he was making things difficult for Yah, because Yah has to honor whatever he says. He says there's no rain, and there's no rain. So perhaps that may well answer the reason why, because Elijah was just going around doing all these things, that Yah sent a chariot for him to take him out of town. It may well be that. And so the word here says, we're back in Matthew chapter 4, that Yeshua, when he heard that John the Baptist or Yohanan the Immerser had departed to Galilee, and leaving Nazareth, he came and dwelt in Capernaum, which is up on the seacoast in the borders of Zebulun and Naphtali. Here it is again. So if you look at your map, you see Naphtali and you see Zebulun further up north by Dan and Manasseh. And Issachar is just beneath that. So that's what happened. So it says, the people which sat in darkness saw the great light. And to them which sat in the region and the shadow of death, because up in this area in Galilee, the people didn't really have any light. Notice also, most of Yeshua's, with the exception of Judas, all came from within the region of Galilee. That's why when he was crucified, they say, you have a Galilean accent. We know who you are. You're from Galilee. And the word here is letting us know, Matthew at least is telling us, the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan, the Galilee of the Gentiles. Did you hear that? He said, this is a Gentile land. The people which sat in darkness saw a great light. That great light is Yeshua. Why? You'll see in a minute why. Yeshua, you know, is from Judah. He's from the house of David. But he had to go to Egypt. He had to go to Africa because Herod was looking for him as a young boy. Remember that story? He had to flee. And we see that in Matthew 2:15, he says, out of Egypt, out of Africa, I call my son. Call my son who? Israel. And when you read that in context of Hosea chapter 11 and verse 1, you understand that the name that was given to Jacob, Israel, is Yeshua's name, Israel, overcomer. Are you with me? So he left Africa and he went, well, he grew up in Nazareth. But when he left Egypt, he never went back to Nazareth because he started his ministry in Capernaum. And the word says that's where the Gentiles were, and they saw a light. So, with that in mind, you now have to turn with me to the book of Isaiah. And I'm going to read that portion from the Septuagint version, Isaiah chapter 9. I'm going to read it from the Septuagint. It says, drink this first. Do it quickly. With regard to the region of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. So what Matthew wrote here in chapter 4 is the prophecy of Isaiah chapter 9 that Yeshua had to fulfill. Now understand something. And you will see the accuracy of the prophecy spoken by Jacob. Yeshua is a baby. And he had to flee to Africa, to Egypt. Before he even had the comprehension to make decisions about life, Yah made it happen because it had to fulfill the prophecy. And when he left Egypt, he never went back to where he went and set up his home. He was raised in Nazareth. This is why the people were confused that he's from Nazareth, but he was born in Bethlehem. He was born in the house of bread. But after that, to start his ministry at the age of 30, he went to Capernaum, where the people needed light. But that's a prophecy from Isaiah chapter 9. Let's read it again. Drink the first, do it quickly, with regard to the region of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, and the rest who inhabit the seashore and the banks of the Jordan, Galilee of the nation. This is the Galilee of the nations. Ye people who walk in darkness, behold a great light, and ye who dwell in the region, the shade of death, on you a light shall shine, with regard to the bulk of the people, whom thou hast brought back to thy joy. They shall rejoice in thy presence, like them who rejoice in the harvest, and like them who are dividing the spoil, because the yoke which lay upon them is taken away, and the rod which was over their neck, he hath broken the rod of the exactors, as in the day of Midian, who with renewal of friendship they shall make compensation for every robe collected by the seat, and for every garment, and shall be willing to do so if they were burned with fire. Because for us a child is born, and to us a son is given, whose government is on his shoulder, and his name is called the messenger of a great counsel. For I will bring peace on the rulers and health for him. So, regardless of what you hear the politicians are saying that they will bring peace, no peace. He said, I've come with a sword. And we read that in Naphtali, he will speak good words. Now, that word is the gospel. And when you read, well, let's go back to Genesis chapter 49. Genesis chapter 49, to put the whole thing in context for you in regards to that area. The word says, Naphtali is a hind let loose. He giveth goodly words. Now, as you know, when Yeshua was there and subsequently his disciples were like deers let loose with the gospel. They just went and ran with it. Are you with me? That's how they ran with it. And the good word here is the gospel. Because Yeshua is the word that he gave to them. Go ye to all the nations. And Galilee was such a place. It was a land of the Gentile. And that's why Yeshua started his ministry there. Because there were people there. And obviously, when we spoke about Naphtali and Asher, that's the area where the oil was found. And in ancient time, that extended into the area of Lebanon where we're fighting even now today. And one day it will again extend to that, because Zechariah tells us in chapter 14, when he comes, the mountains will disappear and the land will regain its original boundaries to accommodate that city that is coming down. Are you with me? And so Jacob here is giving his blessing, and he talks about Joseph in verse 22, chapter 49. Joseph or Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well whose branches ran over the wall. Now, he's a fruitful bough because Yah had blessed him that way. And that which he ran away from, fornication, Reuben succumbed to it. Are you with me? We're dealing with character. Joseph ran away from fornication because the word says flee. Reuben walked into it. We've got to understand that character is what gives you access to the kingdom. And when you read the testimony of Gad, Gad said, I hated Joseph. Because Joseph was with us on one occasion when his father sent him to tend the sheep with us, and a bear took one of the sheep and mangled it to the extent where we didn't think it would live. So we killed it and ate it. And Joseph went back and told Jacob that these boys, you know what they're doing? They're killing off the sheep and eating them. He said, I ate him for that, and I wanted to kill him. That's Gad said that. Again, I'm just emphasizing the character of the Gadites. You sometimes get the impression in some parts of America that they're all Gadites. Are you with? Not only America, but elsewhere. But that's the kind of people, angry, bitter, revengeful. That's the Gadites. But Joseph, he's a bow. Wherever he's planted, his branches hang over and bear fruit. But they hated him and they sold him. They sold him. And so we must understand that on the evening of his well-lived day, Jacob called his sons. And that which you see in Gaza, that which you see in Israel, that which you see in Lebanon is the consequence of what Jacob spoke. It was a blessing for them according to verse 28, but it was a prophecy for the descendants. It was a prophecy. And so as you see the prophecy unfold, drip by drip by drip, war in Ukraine, Hezbollah over there, Israel over there, Gaza over there, war 88 years ago. Selassie says, until the philosophy that owed one race superior and another inferior, until the color of a man's skin is of no more significance than the color of his eyes. Until that day, that dream of lasting peace, he said it's going to be a fleeting illusion to be pursued, but will never be attained. Not until Shiloh comes, the scepter shall not depart from Judah. Until Shiloh comes. So let's bring it together. Come with me to Revelation 22. Revelation 22. And let's look at this irreducible complexity and put it in context. It seemed to me that it is impossible. I don't care which government you put in power. It's impossible for them to reduce the complexity of evil. You cannot legislate morality. You can't. And so the cell of evil in the world, despite of the efforts of man, it's too complex for them to deal with. It's beyond their pay grade. You could vote until you're weak. They could advertise and raise funds until they're blue. This is one man's job. The government will be on his shoulder. That's Yeshua. He said, in the days of these kings, Yeshua will come and he will establish a kingdom here on earth. And he will reign with a rod of iron. And he will reign in righteousness. Tell that to your local MP. Tell that to your senator. That hope that they offer is forlorn. Tell it to them. Tell it to the presidential candidates. Even if they don't believe you, tell them. Revelation 22, and he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of Yahweh and of the Lamb. In the midst of the street of it, and on either side of the river, was there a tree of life. Have you ever wondered why Adam did not eat from the tree of life first before eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil? In the same way, you're probably wondering, why is it we choose first the school or the university that our children should attend rather than where they should offer praise and honor to Yah? That's the tree of life. But even now, we are still choosing knowledge of good and evil over worship. And so we saw that tree of life. And the word is letting us know in verse 14, blessed are they that do his commandment, that they may have right to the tree of life and may enter through the gates of the city. Remember, the gates of the city, they have, how many gates? They have 12 gates. And these gates, your access to it, your visa, your passport through it, is character. Are you with me? No Reubenites. No. Not at all. Not that kind of anger. No Simeonites. Notice Simeon, his numbers dwindled. He has no place of his own. He's now living in Judah's land. The Gadites now, remember the Gadites? The faces are like lion? They are defending David. They were the king. So when you hear people say that the 10 tribes have been lost, no, 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 no. No, no, no. No. Gadites joined David. The Levites came and joined David. Simeon left the south and went north. It's a general population that went. But Judah was not just people from Judah. The Levites were there, and the Gadites were there, and others were there. Meaning, all those who required righteous worship, they came to Jerusalem, and those who required false worship went north. And so, blessed are they who do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life and may enter in through the gates of the city. For without, who are without? Dogs, sorcerers, whoremongers, murderers, idolaters, whosoever loveth to make a lie. Wow. Liars are going to be outside. Adulterers are going to be outside. Tell the Reubenites that. But Joseph, your 2 sons who I put Israel, let them come in. It's character for the kingdom, not where you're born. Well, what do you mean? Well, you hear people saying, well, you know, I'm an Israelite and I'm so and so. No. Nicodemus was born in Israel. Was he not? In chapter 3 of John, we read that he came to Yeshua by night. And Yeshua made it clear to him that you got to be born from above. Well, what do you mean? I was born in Israel. No, 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 no. You've got to be born above. By the Spirit. You mean you're a pastor? You're a teacher, Nicodemus, a PhD from the University of Jerusalem, and you didn't know that you have to be born again? By the Spirit? Oh, yes. So, even today, the descendants of the 225th descendant of Solomon, Haile Selassie, we're still wrestling. We're still struggling against the global dictators of Mussolini. We're still doing that. And despite our efforts to the nations that say they're united, many of our people have been ostracized and violated, and others will come and make the same plea and get resources. But our plea, Selassie's plea, was left unheeded. Exile. We are children of exile. We live in other people's land. But the word says, according to Isaiah, one day, and the psalmist said it too, one day, Ethiopia will do what? Will stretch out his hand. That's what the word says. One day, that day is coming, and it can't be that far away. It cannot be that far away. Ethiopia will stretch out its hand and we will sing. Zephaniah said the same thing, that Ethiopia, the dispersed people, Zephaniah 3 and verse 10, will bring Yah's offering. May it be that we think upon these things, keep these thoughts embedded in our minds, and may we form the characters that will fit us so that we may have access to the tree of life. And let's not boast in where we're born, but more so that we're born in Zion. In Yeshua's name I pray. Amen.